Welcome back to the 2 Months Podcast presented by BioStill and powered by Go Goat Sports. I'm your host, Joshua Marshall. My co-host is with me this evening. We got Phil Stockley. Phil, how's it going?
Going pretty good. Set up the man cave and the little area here that I'm going to be recording in from now on. As I mentioned a few weeks ago, my son took my office as his bedroom because the boys split up now and have their own rooms. So here we are.
Yes,
So that's kind of what I've been up to here.
having some fun, right? And
You got
I
it.
don't have my Leafs set up gear yet, but our next guest is going to kind of probably have a laugh at what you have set up and maybe future what I have set up. But our next guest is back with us, and this is multiple hits he does with us, and we're proud to have him on monthly with us this season. It's going to be awesome, and the season is getting going. We like to welcome Bob Stauffer from the Edmonton Oilers and the Edmonton Oilers Radio Network, and Roger Sportsnet on the regional coverage. Staff, how's it going?
Oh, great. I mean, it's kind of funny, right? Like I'm sitting here doing the 2 months podcast and, Josh is a Leafs fan and Phil, I can see, you've honored two hard-nosed guys that overcame, a little bit of the fact that they weren't the biggest guys, but they're real good players for the Calgary Flames. So, it's kind of funny because I tend to put pretty specific Oilers stuff out on Twitter, and I can always tell when I've rankled the nerves of maybe somebody that's a strong supporter of Austin Matthews or someone that just flat out despises the Edmonton Oilers. Sometimes they're from Calgary, so I get a good chuckle with it. It certainly provides an interesting perspective.
Yeah, actually, I was actually thinking about this, Bob. I was gonna ask you, how do you deal with the haters on Twitter and social media and people who might not always agree with your takes?
Well, first of all, Phil, you don't have to agree with all of the takes. That's kind of part of what we do is we have dialogue and discussion. Um, but I'm gonna, it's funny. Just before we did this tonight, I went to walk our dog and with my family, and we have a golden retriever. And a number of years ago, I was with my wife and my son, and a neighbor had a golden retriever. And the neighbor's a much smaller man than me, and he lost control of his dog, and his dog attacked my dog in front of my son. And so I had to sort of break the two dogs up, and I wasn't too happy with the guy at the time. And my son was really rattled, and his dog bit my hand as I grabbed the dog basically off of our dog. And tonight I went walking by and I saw him, and it's pretty clear, his dog has passed away. Like he doesn't have his dog anymore. And he looked at me and I looked at him, and I just sort of, gave him the nod, and he gave me the nod. And I think empathy goes a long way in trying to figure out motivations in other people. A number of years ago, I'll tell you a quick story. When we first moved Oilers Now over to 630 Ched, full disclosure, like I was on 03 to 08 on 1260, and I'd heard the occasional comment, that Stauffer's no good, or this is never going to go anywhere, or anything like that, or one of the ones I used to hear, Cates is never going to get the Edmonton Oilers, that sort of stuff. And I moved in, and we ended up moving the show in about 2011. And it was right around the time, maybe 11, 12, 12, 13, the arena debate was going on. And one of the sales guys was representing Northlands. And I'd made a comment about, we need to expedite this process and he came up with into the studio while I was on air with a fierce defense of Northlands to me. And I'd have to say that's pretty atypical to have a sales guy come in the studio and yell at you while you're on air hosting your show. And it hadn't happened a lot over the years with me. And, my initial reaction was, man, lighten up, chill out a bit, like let's have the conversation at a different time and place. A couple of years later, unfortunately for this guy, and he was just defending his client, but a couple of years later, he lost his son. And so that changed the narrative in our relationship a bit. And that's so awful that you just feel brutal for him, right? Like, and the lesson in that is you never truly understand what anybody else is going through. So even when guys rip on you or have really aggressive takes, guys or gals, sometimes you just, you just got to kind of roll with it, especially when you work for a team and work for an organization. Like, you got to have broad shoulders, and you got to have thick skin. There's some disappointing comments. I try not to block people, Phil. Now, if they swear at me or if they use a sexually derogatory term in a tweet at me, then sometimes we'll block those guys. But most of the time, I just sort of, you got to, like, I've talked to David Staples about this, and he's blocked like 2,000 people. I can't imagine blocking, I've blocked probably under 100, and 80 to 90 of them have been with some sort of politically inappropriate. One of the 7 words that George Carlin says you can't say on TV, we're probably down to 3. So I guess what I'm saying to you is you try to understand other people's motivations, have some empathy, because you never really know what anybody else is going through, and fair debate is fair debate. Like, people don't have to agree with how I see things on a certain player. We're going to have that discussion tonight. Like, you know what? If I was in Toronto doing a show, first of all, I think the Leafs hired the perfect general manager to replace Kyle Dubas, because I think the Leafs need something different. And I think they've built their team differently, and I think they're a legitimate threat to win the Eastern Conference. I think Calgary's going to be better than what people think they're going to be. I'm surprised they regressed to the level that they did last season. And I am not a ABC guy. You know what ABC is? Anybody?
Yeah,
but
I know what it
Calgary.
is.
Yeah. I'm not an ABC guy. I'd rather see Calgary and Vancouver have really good seasons and battle it out with Edmonton for top spot in the Pacific Division than, say, Vegas and Seattle. And I know Kelly McCrimmon. I know Rick Olchek with Seattle, Kelly in Vegas. But at the end of the day, fair criticism is fair criticism. If it gets a little rude or gets a little heated, sometimes I wonder where it's coming from. So usually I just try to diffuse most of those scenarios, and sometimes I have fun with it. Like when guys would text the show and say, "Hey, Stauffer, you suck," I'd text back and say, "Uncle Brian, quit texting the show."
Yes.
Like I try to have it, and I learned that from Ryan Jones. I don't know if I told the story before to you guys, but we were in New York in the island, and it was when the Oilers weren't very good, and they were leaving the ice, and the fans are really close in that old building, that old Nassau County Coliseum. And I could literally hear them catcalling the Oilers as they left the ice. And then suddenly everybody stopped and started laughing. And I was like, what happened? So I asked a couple of guys, and they said, well, the fans were saying, "You guys suck. You guys are losers." And Ryan Jones had looked up at the stands and said, "Dad, quit following the team on the road." And I just thought it was a perfectly executed comeback. So have a little bit of fun with it is what I'm saying. And understand that sometimes maybe some other people out there are going through some tough times, and you got to have some empathy.
Yeah. It's great and well said by you, Bob. And yeah, you've been tremendous to me over the years. And
against my better judgment.
Yes, exactly. Probably right. So, Phil, do you want to any close out on that? I know you kind of asked that question, but you want to kind of dive into that a little bit more or say anything there?
Yeah, it's so true. And even like when we had Ron McLean on, like his whole thought on that kind of same situation was like, everybody is somebody's son or daughter or mother or father, right? So
you don't know what people are going through, man. And
yeah.
you know what? At the end of the day, ask yourself, would you really wish ill upon somebody else? And don't get me wrong, I had competitive juices, was a fiery guy, and I want to beat up, I'm less concerned about it now. But I kind of look at it like, guys, like, I'm lucky. I got a really unique combination of roles, between doing the color on the games, hosting the show. We'll see how it goes with the move into the late afternoon. And then going on NHL hockey and Rogers and Sportsnet, that trio of jobs. I mean, there's a lot of other people that wish they'd have the opportunity to do those. So I certainly recognize how lucky I am.
Yeah, that's you say what is it? The toy department of work.
That's Bryn Griffith's line. I got to credit the source.
Yeah, exactly.
We work in the toy department of life.
Yes.
So there you have it.
There you go. We'll go to the Oilers theme here, and this is sponsored by our friends at Shadified Salon and Barbershop. Shaddy just loves you, Bob. So
he's the only one.
He's a big fan of yours. Every time we see him, he's like, "Tell Staff I say hello." So maybe you got to say hello back to Shaddy here.
Hey, Shaddy, what's up? Send me a check.
There you go. Exactly. But so let's move to the Oilers theme here. You're obviously done some great interviews over the last little week here in the new time slot. Is anything in any of those interviews stood out to you with Connor, Leon, Ekholm, or Jeff Jackson, or any of the others?
Well, I mean, I don't think it's lost in anybody. And look, I hear a lot of the Calgary guys, if not the whole team in Calgary. I think teams realize you have to be all in to win. And you know, I went down there Tuesday morning, coming out of Labor Day, and knew right away that the large percentage of the team were there, or all of the team was there. Let's expect it to be on the team, and they're the captain skates. And you know, I just think of how much this stuff's evolved, you guys. Like I worked at the University of Alberta from 2000 to 2008, and for several of those years, we hosted the Kevin Primo conditioning camp. And I used to, you ready for this?
Yes.
I used to fax a list of who was at that camp to the media guys in town so that they would know who was down there for a conditioning camp. And you know, and guys would sort of work around their golf schedule and that sort of thing. And you know, the serious guys would be there 5 out of 5 days a week, the semi-serious guys 4, and you know, the half milers would do 3. And now we're in, you know, then they'd roll in a training camp. Now, training camp was different back then. It was longer. I think one year they might have had 10 or 12 games, 2 days and all that kind of stuff. They're much more everything because of the CBA is different now. But I think it bodes well for any team that's got a large percentage of their teams skating together, and that's the case for the Oilers. And then the other thing that I picked up on is, and it doesn't surprise anybody, I think there's a realization there was a missed opportunity last year. You know, they're right there with Vegas, tied 2-2 in the series, outshot the Golden Knights, whatever it was, 75-53 in the final 2 games. Had a bad 3-minute stretch in Vegas where they lost 4-3, and then Aiden Hill stole game 6, right? And then Vegas got up 3-0 on Dallas and beat Florida in 5. So certainly there was an opportunity for Edmonton to kick the door in last year and win the Stanley Cup. I would say that would be the first time. Like, you know, yeah, they lost to Colorado in the conference final. Maybe they went further the year before, but just by virtue of the addition of Ekholm, that to me, they were closer to a Stanley Cup caliber team last year. And now they got to take that next step. And I think that basically anybody connected to the organization realizes that's the position they're in.
Yeah. You were doing a hit with Frank Saravalli. He was trying to come up with a cool name for that Friday night interview that you guys will have, or Friday nights with Frank, or whatever it is. But the one of the topics that was intriguing to me is your thoughts on Jack Campbell and how he looks right now as he comes into the captain skates. Can you guys dive a little bit deeper into that stuff?
All I can tell you is it's clear his body composition has changed. And far be it for a fat 245 to 250 pound broadcaster to comment on the fitness level of a professional athlete. But it appears as though he's slimmed down. I fully expect Jack to have a better year. He had a tough campaign. That's a given. Didn't go well for the Oilers with him last year. Excuse me, guys. I'm having a bit of an allergic reaction. I'm in the cat room upstairs.
Oh,
so this is the bonus room.
Yeah.
And we have one cat that's in here permanently, and so sometimes the allergies act up after a while, and I don't think I have the window open. But long story short, I expect Jack to bounce back. I do. To be honest with you, it would not surprise me if both Jack Campbell and Stuart Skinner both had 40 to 47 appearances this year. Like I think it's going to be split between the two of them. And Campbell played pretty well down the stretch, and I think that. You know, I'm hoping that he can realize some of the potential that he has in the game. So, yes, and I think Friday nights with Frank is a great header too that we can probably go with for our friends at Horse Racing Alberta.
Exactly, Phil.
How many seasons is this now that you're going to be with the Oilers, Bob?
This would be the 16th.
16th season.
Yes. Is that right?
I was going to ask you.
2, 3.
We'll let you.
12. Yeah, this would be the 16th.
16th. So I was going to ask you to go over, like, what was it? How did you get your start with the Oilers, and how do you have a good story for maybe that first season with the Oilers?
I do have a good story. You know, in the 07-08 year, well, full disclosure, I had actually discussed working for a team in town, but not the Oilers. during the lockout year in 05, 04, 05. And that was with the Edmonton Eskimos. They were going to go to a salary management system, and they were going to have to change how they did Canadian scouting. And I watched more university and junior football than anybody that they had in their staff. We had a conversation. I spoke to somebody with the Oilers at that time, and he just said, wait. And I think it's well known that, my show was an independent, and it was, I got word that Daryl Cates was interested in purchasing the team and also building a downtown arena. I was family friends with Ken Nichols. He texted me yesterday because he's moved to Texas, so he was rubbing it in last night when the Longhorns, frankly, knocked the snot out of Alabama and won that game in Alabama 34-24. And he knows I'm a big Crimson Tide fan, but at the end of the day, Daryl had a vision for a downtown arena. He was going to spend up to the cap, and he was going to do everything possible to keep his best players. And some of that vision got explained on our show, though I never said specifically where I got the information from. Mm-hmm. So it turned out that an opportunity presented itself in August of 2008, and I said yes. I mean, there's between radio and TV, I guess there's 64 color jobs in the National Hockey League. And then in terms of a funny story, so Rod Phillips, I did his last 2 years where I did the color. And on the first road trip, he looked at me and he goes, because he knew I did the Golden Bears. Phil, I did the Golden Bears for 13 years, 89 and 92 and 08, 98 to 08. And he said, Bob, how many games did you broadcast last year for the Golden Bears where they lost? And I said, 4, because they won the national title. Derek Ryan was their third line center that year. I said, 4. He goes, really? I go, yeah, 4, because I didn't do the games in the first half of the year. They lost like 4 in the second half of the season, but they won the national title. And he goes, well, we're going to lose a hell of a lot more than 4. We could lose as many as 45. We'll probably lose between 35 to 45 games. So you need to realize, first lesson when you're on the road, win or lose, we're going to booze. We're going to have at least one drink afterwards and sit back. And so I just listened to a lot of his stories. He was around the Oilers in the halcyon days of the 1980s. It was really Bill Twilly, Rod Phillips, and Jim Matheson. They were the day-to-day guys. Obviously, we have a little bit bigger entourage. So from the first couple of years, that was, Mac T did the first year, 08-09, basically resigned himself. And he's going to join me every Monday now in Oilers Now for about an hour. It's going to be called Mac T on Mondays, as he's pretty much retired from coaching. And I've always respected that Kevin Lowe and Mac T made Edmonton their home after they're done. They were committed guys. So we're going to have some fun with Mac T, and he's not going to free pass me in anything, and the fans are going to love it because they're going to like him giving me a hard time once in a while. And then we had Pat Quinn, God rest his soul, in 9-10, and then the change was made to Tom Rennie for a couple of years, and then we went Ralph Kruger for a year, and then Dallas Aikens for a year and a half, and Todd Nelson. Todd McLeod was a little bit different animal because he'd had a lot of success in San Jose, and he, of course, had Jay Woodcroft. So it's been interesting. The Oilers have never been closer during the time that I've done the games. And right now, in fact, I'd argue to you guys, they've never been closer since 87, 88. Because nobody saw them winning in 89, 90. And nobody saw them making it to the Stanley Cup final in 05, 06. So in my opinion, this is the best team on paper since the 87, 88 season.
That's awesome. Yeah, and it's been, the knowledge you have in the game and obviously the great pulse you have with the Oilers is amazing. And as we said before, the listeners love you. You're
not all the time. Not all the time.
On our end, they do. So we get the good people, I guess, right? So no, there's good people everywhere, but you're not going to have everyone that agrees with everything you say or do 100%. And
I don't know, Josh, but I'll give you an example. So last year, do you remember the game in LA right after in the New Year?
Yeah.
And the Kings won 6-3 and there were 3 fights and Deneau jumped Puljujärvi and then Costin fought Lemieux at the end of the game. I think
Hyman and Sean Dursey fought.
And Dursey, they fought. And I remember the next day I went on the air and their record was 21-18-3, and I'd said at the start of the season they'd finish with 47 to 52 wins. And I said, I'm not wavering on this. They're going to finish with 47 to 52 wins because they have a way easier schedule in the second half. And all these guys, probably 60% of the texts are like, you're such a homer, and they sign your paycheck and you're a loser and you suck and,
Yeah.
all this stuff. And so we have a 5-year ability on the text line to manage see what guys say at that number. Right. And so it was funny. Like, I know when Edmonton got to the 50 win plateau, at least 8 to 10 texters that ripped me said, Bob, I ripped you when you said they'd still win 47 to 52 wins. You were right. It's the last time I'll ever admit that you're right. But, like Josh, you're going to have times people don't agree with you and people like you. It comes with the territory. And sometimes they're justified in feeling that way.
Mm-hmm. We'll stick with the Oilers teams. Phil and I were kind of talking about this before we jumped on and before you jumped on, but I wonder where you stand with, and then you touched on this a little bit before in some of the episodes you've done with us and bringing maybe the ice time down for McDavid and Draisaitl. But do you think the power play minutes for them will drop down, or you think they'll still do the 2 minutes? And then how would you engage the roster a bit more where there isn't where the bottom six isn't playing 6 minutes a night? Which way would you utilize those players, or whether their role is more utilized and they feel like they have a role?
Do you know what Bear Bryant, who before Nick Saban was generally considered the greatest college football coach in history, said who the best coach was?
I think the best coach Nick Saban, but yeah, sorry.
He said the best coach is the guy that walks off the bus with the best players.
Yes.
The better the players, the easier it is to coach a team. If you look at where Edmonton was when they lost to Winnipeg, right, in the spring of 21, if you look at that time, they didn't have Hyman, they didn't have Evander Kane in their top six, and they didn't have Ekholm on their defense.
Mm-hmm.
They just simply have a better team. Would I cut the first unit power play minutes down? No, because they're the greatest power play we've ever seen, and now they have Bouchard, which created a completely different look in the playoffs, and the power play was even better against better teams. Like LA and Vegas were better teams than some of the weaker teams. So I wouldn't cut, but where I would cut is the 5-on-5 minutes, and you're going to be able to do that because I think the club has to transition Holloway into the lineup more and play him. And I know they had success with Derek Ryan along with Fogle and Ryan McLeod. But personally, we saw in New York earlier in the year last year, Holloway play with McLeod and Fogle, and that's the line that I'd play as third line. And I'd play that line 13 to 15 minutes every game. Lots of 5-on-5 time. And then on defense. So I would like to see McDavid and Draisaitl each play 1 minute fewer per game. But I would keep them out on the power play because they're dominant. And then in terms of the defense, I'd actually like to see Nurse come down by about 90 seconds per game. And I think you're going to be able to do it because now you have Ekholm. So maybe you play Darnell 22 and a half instead of 24 and a half. And then you play Ekholm 20, and then you got Kulak at 17 to 18. And on the right side, Bouchard's going to play 22 because he's going to play in the power play. And this is where Broberg comes in. He's had success playing the right time, and I think he's got to earn it. But I wouldn't be surprised if he finds a way to play more than 12 minutes a game. And then you still have CC that can play 20 minutes, and that still leaves you Desharnais. But I think I think part of the reason why they're going to be able to balance out the minutes is because they've transitioned the last 2 years, Bouchard on defense and McLeod up front. And I now think it's time to transition Holloway and Broberg. And I'm confident in believing that those two guys can accomplish that.
Yeah, I feel like Holloway is probably going to be interchangeable into the top six with Connor Brown. I think those two guys will slot each other in and out. But
maybe.
Yeah, like the only reason why I say is like I wonder how much, usage Connor Brown's going to want before he gets up to running. Like obviously coming off an ACL, is he how many preseason games he gets in? Does he chomp for more than the usual veteran would just to get the game speed up? Or, does he have a slower start? But, I've obviously watched him in Toronto. He's a heck of a player. And like you said, he's Hyman-like. So I think that'll be a good add for them. And it adds, like, if you break those guys up on each different lines, that's just a great two-way element that you're going to have with Nuge in the lineup too. So I think their 5-on-5 numbers and the goals against numbers are going to drop, like I would say, substantially this year. So
if their goals against numbers drops substantially, then they won't be a top 5 team. You know what? Saying that, last year they were 2 points out of first in the Western Conference.
Yes.
Because they're going to be able to score. Like, they led the league in scoring last year, and they have the best power play.
Yeah.
And last year was the first time 5-on-5 when McDavid and Draisaitl were not on the ice, where they were, plus in goal differential, right? Mm-hmm. And they were double digits plus in goal differential. And so, and I think goaltending is going to play a factor. And I think Ekholm, they were 9th in the league in goals against when Ekholm came over for the final 21 games. I mean, the Oilers went 18-2-1 in those 21 games. So they also have a favorable schedule to start the year. They have a lighter workload, which allows them to get everybody up to speed. You make an interesting point on Brown, though, in terms of how much, because I think we know for sure that Sutter and Gagne are coming in on PTOs. Maybe another guy comes in, maybe another one doesn't.
Yeah.
But last year, I think they played Virtanen 5 of the first 6 games. So he had lots of work, and I expect Sutter and Gagne, if they're ready to go, that they'll get lots of work out of the gate as well.
Yeah, because what is it, 8 preseason games they have?
Yes, 8 preseason. So, I mean, if they're both healthy and 100%, I can see them both playing, 5 of the first 6 games.
Correct, yeah. And I think Brown plays the 5 of the first 6 games too. But maybe there's I just wonder with the ACL, do they ease him in and then he plays more?
Maybe you're right.
Yeah.
Maybe you're right.
Well, it'll be interesting to see. Phil, you have anything there? I know you want to ask some Flame stuff, but do you have some Oilers stuff there before we move on?
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you. They say the whole team is there right now. How does Sutter and Gagne look? And I kind of made a comment.
I have not seen either guy on the ice yet. So I just went down there to do the interviews. Did not. I watched about 25 minutes on Wednesday. So it's really tough to tell in that sort of.
Yeah.
Right. So, but Campbell looks lighter and quicker.
And then, I kind of brought this up on the podcast in our roundtable. Do you think that move to bring those guys in is to give maybe a guy like McLeod a bit of a push to take the next step?
Oh, I think McLeod's firmly entrenched as a 3rd-line center on the team. Kills penalties, needs to continue to work in the face-off circle. Can he become a 15-goal, 40-point 3rd-line center that'll help him in his next contract? Yeah, probably. They've got right now, if you look at their team, they got 11 for sure forwards, right? Let's just operate under the context, for the sake of argument, that they're going to go Evander Kane with McDavid and Connor Brown. And then they're going to go Zach Hyman on the right side, if Nugent Hopkins on the left side, and Draisaitl at center. And then, Holloway with McLeod and Fogle. That leaves Janmark and Derek Ryan. Those 11 forwards are on the team. I have 7D on the team. I got Broberg on the team. So, maybe we're looking, and I know they played Ekholm and Bouchard, but maybe it ends up being Ekholm and Broberg, and Bouchard plays with Nurse, and then CC plays along with Kulak, and they balance the minutes of the pairings out a little bit more, and that leaves Desharnais as a 7. They can't, so all they can afford is a 4th-line center. So, and preferably a right shot. Now, Lane Peterson's a right shot at 775, and then you got 2 PTOs and Sutter. Can he jumpstart his career? He's a right shot. He's played exclusively center. And Gagne's sort of evolved, Phil, more frankly, like Derek Ryan, where he's played a lot more on the right side the last 2 or 3 years. But he can, maybe play a little bit at center too. So, there's some say, well, what about James Hamlin? I guess he's got an outside chance. And I'd also say keep an eye on the waiver wire, because you never know. Yep. You never know. But to answer your question, I think the PTOs will both get a legitimate opportunity. Ken Holland's history is he doesn't bring in guys just for the sake of bringing guys in. He generally, it has to be a legitimate shot to make the team. So we'll see what happens. But I don't think it's necessarily set in stone that it's going to be one of Sutter or Gagne that fills that 12th forward spot. There could be more options available than we even know about right now.
All right.
Yeah, Phil, you said you want to move over the Flames stuff there. You have some Flame stuff you want to ask them?
Let me put my Flames deep thinking hats on here.
Right on.
Yeah, so I was gonna ask you, we kind of had a bit of again during the round table, we had a bit of a longer discussion about who's gonna be the Calgary Flames captain. Is there a captain in that room? Um, if so, like who do you peg as a captain of the Calgary Flames next season?
Elias Lindholm, because I think they're going to get him signed to a long-term deal. I think they're going to pay big bucks to do it. I think he's their best player. I think he was actually, I mean, I know you got Goodrow over your, for the viewers right now,
For
over the West
for now.
for now, right? But I personally think Lindholm's going to end up being, I think they're going to get him done. Obviously, I don't think they'll get Hannafin done. Josh might have a better idea, or maybe you do, Phil, on a guy like Backlund. But Lindholm played a factor in the recruitment of Jacob Markstrom, and I think that that's probably the guy that gets the best scenario of the guy that gets signed long term, and I also think he's their best two-way player. So I would make him captain. That's what I would do if I was Calgary Flames. What do you think of that?
I like that answer. I like that answer. I think that's a great answer. And I know I think it was Brody McIntyre on the roundtable. He also chose Lindholm too, if I'm not mistaken.
Bob and Brody were never wrong.
No, his son just got into a fight, Turner McIntyre, in the WHL tonight, actually. So Turner McIntyre.
Are we still allowed to fight in junior hockey?
Yeah. He's with the new team in Washington there.
Wenatchee,
yes. I was just missing the name, but yeah, good on him. And yeah, Blake Fidler scored for the Oil Kings last night. So in the River Cree game, and I know they were playing in Red Deer today. I haven't seen what the results.
They won 4-3.
Nice.
Yeah.
No, good on that. So looking to probably do some more WHL coverage. What do you think of, like, just a quick thought on the WHL stuff, where things are at right now, and what the Oil Kings are up with here with, they're bringing Nash in with a trade that was pretty, I think that was pretty good. And obviously got Drone's kid on the team, Blake Fidler.
Well, Jerome's kid's not going to be on the team because he's
this year.
he was drafted, but it's funny. I just did an event up in Grand Prairie on Thursday with the Storm, Junior A. I mean, anybody that knows me knows I'm a proponent of WHL. I just wish they had fewer teams.
Yes.
Like when I grew up, I wasn't good enough to play in the Western League at 17. There was 12 teams. We're at 22 teams right now. And I think and maybe I don't understand the nuance of what happens at the Memorial Cup. There was only 8 kids out of the Quebec League drafted last year. I know we had George. You guys know I have George on the show, and he personally thinks the Quebec League isn't physical enough, and it results in a situation where guys are, NHL organizations are a little. I mean, 8 kids in the entire draft out of the Quebec League, but they keep winning the Memorial Cup. And Quebec, I mean, Seattle had a loaded up team, 6 players off the Canadian World Junior team. They couldn't, I mean, it was a ridiculously talented team and they lost. Now they got out coached. Patrick Waugh did a really good job. So I'll stand by my comment. There's 22 teams. I'm not sure that 22 teams worth of players is available. When the league was 12 or 14 or 16 teams, they basically won the Memorial Cup 2 out of every 3. So you know how long it's been since the WHL team won the Memorial Cup, Josh?
I think is it 13 years or 14 now?
That's 2014 Edmonton won.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Okay. So now saying that, I think Edmonton might have had a better team had there been a 21 Memorial Cup than the team that went to 22. I think they were deeper in 21 without making those big trades. But that said, that I personally believe there's too many teams. I still think it's the best as long as, and I do think kids are more mentally mature than ever before. They've had better coaching all the way through. We've now raised a generation of coaches that aren't yellers and screamers and don't believe in breaking people down and build them up, because no one needs that. But at the end of the day, like you look at Ontario, they got 20 teams for 14.5 million people. You look at the Quebec League, and if you add the Atlantic provinces, maybe you can say, all right, they got, what's in Quebec, 8.4, and then maybe another 1.6 million in the Atlantic. That's 10 million people for 18 teams. There's 22 teams in the WHL for 11 million. out west. That seems a little high to me. So I'm sure Ron Robinson would have a healthy debate with me on this, but I am of the belief there's too many teams. They still produce really good players, and there's some very good people coaching and managing in that league. I just wish they had a couple fewer teams.
Yeah. All right, let's move over to the Leafs real quick here. It's first time getting you back on since Austin Matthews has resigned. And I do want to give some pretty good kudos to Brad Treliving, as you did earlier. When I was going through a really tough time in my life about 4 years ago, Brad and Peter Hanlon were absolutely tremendous to me and got me a conversation with Travis Hamonic. I just think Brad is more than just a hockey general manager. I think the guy's
a great guy.
He's an amazing person. I probably wouldn't be sitting here today doing this interview if it wasn't for him. And he had a small part in my life. I know you know him more than I do, but I'm great to see that he got this contract done. I was just wondering where you're at here. One of the takes that I kind of seen a lot and listen to the guys on Overdrive there. The biggest thing that I think that comes out of this is that, out of Austin Matthews, 12 years in Toronto, there's really no hometown discount. They didn't really get a discount per se. Is that a fair comment to make, or do you think it is a discount in what he has because maybe with the cap going up and some of the contracts coming off the books? Where are you at with his hometown?
Well, the first thing I'd say here is the guys in Toronto probably know the situation better than I do. Like, in fairness, like they're living it on a day-to-day basis. Now, I did interview, I don't know if you heard, but I did interview Judd Moldaver. We specifically avoided the topic of the because I didn't want to necessarily do a comparison and contrast, and I know we might segue into McDavid, Draisaitl out of Matthews. I totally understand the flexibility created in doing that term length on that deal. Like, to me, and to be honest with you, I wouldn't be worried about the money.
Yeah.
He's no worse. Worst case scenario, he's the third best player in the league. Worst case scenario.
Yes.
He's probably, most people would say he's probably the second best. Like, we're lucky. We're in Canada, and the best player in the league is in Edmonton. And depending upon who you think's the second best, either Draisaitl or Matthews, and I realize Nate's up there too, but if you look at the productivity of the other guys, they've outproduced them in their NHL career. So if I was Toronto, I'd be happy. You got him for 4 more years. He was the more important guy to get done. They have a legitimate chance to win the Eastern Conference. They do. They got a good team. And what was the one comment about their team? They weren't playoff built. They didn't have the right to, well, they're like the Oilers. They've added a little bit of size. Like the Oilers with, Hyman, who plays a very tenacious game. Kane, who is a physical power forward, and then obviously Ekholm on the back end. And I mean, think of, again, back to the series against Winnipeg. The Oilers had a defense pairing of Tyson Barrie and Chris Russell. Okay. Great guys. That was their second pairing. And then they had either Caleb Jones or Ethan Bear in the third pairing. Like, they had a small defense. And now we're sitting here and it's going to be Nurse 6'4", Ekholm 6'4", Kulak 6'2.5", right side. Bouchard 6'2", Broberg 6'3.5", CC 6'3", and then Darnay 6'7". Like, they've completely added size to their back end. And you look at Toronto, and they've added bite to their forward groups because the perception was they were a little soft up front. Well, now they got Reeves, who's as tough as anybody and runs. And I know the analytics aren't pretty when he's on the ice. Well, Toronto doesn't have an issue with analytics. They've been a strong puck possession team for years and years. Yeah. They can handle having a guy run around keeping people honest for 9 minutes a game. Domi is a very unpredictable player in a way that scares guys around the league because he can punch above his weight class. Just ask Ryan Kessler.
And so Vander Kane's a lot like that too, but maybe on the bigger side of it.
Yeah, and Kane's obviously a more proven goal scorer to this stage in his career.
Correct.
I still like Lafferty there. Like, to me, he's a hard, fast guy. So I think Toronto's done some things. And the term length, the price point, it's the cost of doing business. We're talking about, like, it's a superstar player, Josh.
I know.
Like you pay your best players. That's kind of how it works in a cap system.
If you were part of our last episode, he's not a superstar player. So we had we, Clay Vanderham and Trevor Ruptash. You've been on with them before. They said if they have actually Ryan Nugent Hopkins better than Austin Matthews. That's where they have him ranked. So
I love Ryan Nugent Hopkins. He
yeah.
never had more than 69 points in the season till last year. And I'm never going to belittle Ryan because he's one of the best people you'll ever meet in the world. But Austin Matthews is a really special player. Ryan is a great guy. He's had a wonderful career, and hopefully he finishes with over 1,000 points as an Oiler and a couple Stanley Cups. But I just said Austin Matthews is a top 3 player in the world all day.
Long, yeah. And Craig Button would agree with that. Craig Button actually was on 3 weeks ago, and he said anyone would be stupid. Phil, what did he say? I don't know if you were there for that interview. Craig was hot.
I listened to it. Yeah, he just made all the comparisons to like Ovi and Gretzky, and he's like, yeah, I'd say you're stupid and you're uneducated if you don't believe that. So about Austin Matthews.
The one thing I'd say, guys, is if you look at the points per game,
playoffs is one that stands out, and that's the biggest criticism he gets, Bob, and he gets that in Toronto all day long. Like they just fired their show back up this week, so Noodles and O'Dog were off, so they all got back together, and that's the thing. It's like, hey, great contract, great regular season, but you need to do it in the playoffs. You don't,
and that's the difference with McDavid and Draisaitl over the last 2 years. They lead the league in playoff scoring. Like, here's the Oilers' quick numbers for you. For those that want to criticize Ken Holland, he took over a 25th place team. Edmonton's got the 8th best record in the league since he took over. Since Jay Woodcroft's coached the team February 10th of 2022, Edmonton has the second best record. The Oilers also have played as many playoff series in the last 2 years as anybody else. 5, right? Nobody's played more than 5 playoff series. And McDavid and Draisaitl have the most points in the league. They're 1-2 in playoff scoring the last 2 years combined. End of discussion. It's hard to ignore what they've done, and that it bodes well. And for the Leafs, the next step is a little bit of playoff traction. Yeah. And they shouldn't have lost to Florida, you guys. The funny thing is, they probably should have beat Tampa a year ago. They probably should have lost to Tampa this year. Yes. They got the bounces this year against Tampa.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so all right. Well, no, great comments there. Phil will move and finish up with the text line. So I'll give that to you there. Sponsored by our friends at CDN. So go ahead.
Yeah, our CDN fan text inbox sponsored by CDN Wear. Go check out their hats. Their hats are really sick, really nice hats. So we'll start off. Tyler Kirk wants to know, do you think Jonathan Taves plays again? And is that a good move for the Oil in the future?
Well, I think he stated that he's not playing this year. So I don't know if he's going to play again. Part of me thinks it might be great for Jonathan Taves to retire just only playing with one team as a Chicago Blackhawk. But I'm not Jonathan Taves. It sounds again like he's not going to play this year. I respect a guy, who says, I want to play at the top, and if I can't play at that level, we're watching Joey Votto in baseball, right? And he was like a 300 plus hitter for the first 12 or 15 years of his career. And I know he's overcome some significant challenges along the way, and he's helped out a lot of people, but he's had a rough last couple seasons, and he's hitting around 215, 220. So therein lies the rub. I guess an athlete, I'll never tell an athlete what to do, because I wasn't gifted or worked hard enough at the right age to have gotten to where I wanted to get as a player. So I respect the player for making the choice, but I have a sneaking suspicion that Taves sees himself in a certain light and maybe doesn't want to be a fourth line center at this stage in his career.
All right. Moving on. Jason Rostad wants to know, how do you, Bob, personally feel about getting your show moved from the 12 p.m. to the 5 p.m.?
Well, we had a 14-year run, 2 years on 1260 and 12 years on Ched. It was the longest serving show on Ched. Josh has helped educate me on sort of the podcast end of things. We had 7.7 million downloads of the podcast over the last calendar year, August 31st, 2022 to August 31st, 2023. Now our show benefits because we break our show into 4 parts. I personally felt the show was successful. I know the the rate card for the show versus some other shows on the radio station. But that said, what I think is kind of irrelevant to it, right? I'm the guy that has to execute it, and we have to continue to work at providing the best product we can. And having the best product means getting the best guests you can, which is why we've added specifically Craig McTavish and
On
Ron McLeod to our stable list here. When you look at it, I mean, I think that two of the biggest insiders in the game, and Frank Saravalli and Elliot Friedman. I got two former NHL GMs with Brian Lawton and Craig McTavish. I've got, a wonderful storyteller like Ron. And we've added Rob Brown for a permanent hit once a week on the show. And we've got Louis. We got George Larocque coming on. So John Shannon, who helps us out with sort of a television league side of things. Bottom line is, years ago, there was a guy, Marty Forbes, when I first started at 1260. And I met with Marty and Brent Griffiths and Carl Stark and a guy named Greg Diamond. And we met in November of 2002. And Marty said, Bob, the key is product. You have a really good memory and you got a decent voice, and you're going to be able to find some advertisers, but the better the guests and the better information you bring, the better the show. So the show's moved. We're going to get, we've gone out of our way to get better guests. We're still going to be on the road with the team during the course of the year. I'll be honest with you, it's going to be hard on the road at night when guys are going out for dinner.
Yeah.
And I'm hosting the show from my hotel room.
Just thought of that. That's
right. And then in terms of on a personal level, in town, it's a completely different scenario. The workload on game days might actually be a little easier. It's going to be continuous because I'm going to be on 3 hours before the game to an hour and a half before the game. And then I'm going to jump on during the pregame show with Reed. Then obviously I've got the broadcast to do with either Cam or Jack. Cam's going to do about 3/4 of them. Jack's going to do 3/4 of the game on NHL Hockey and Rogers. And then on those games, I'll hop in and do the intermission. So I'll circle back that, Phil, just saying it's a privilege to do what I do, and I got to execute. It's that simple. So hey, good question, fair question. I got to make the most of the opportunity that's there.
Yeah.
Great answer. Do you have something to add to that, Bosco?
There's one thing to add, but not to that. But no, I think it's it's changing a lot of lives. There's actually the gentleman that you met at a restaurant here, Bob, that knows me. His name's Carmelo. You ran into him, and I was watching his kid play hockey the other day, and he goes, "Man, my life is not the same right now with the noon to two's not there." He was having a tough transition to it, so I had to educate him on how to do podcasts so he can listen to the show.
Well, you helped me. You helped us. I did not know that there was a separate category. So he kept on being. You told me, "Stop! You're always like top 10 sports podcasts in Canada, but why you don't show up in hockey?" And I think what happened is when we were one of the first shows to podcast, like maybe 6 or 7 years ago, we had a really astute advertiser by the name of Jack Cookson from Pro M Sports. He bought the podcast before Chorus. They got a company called Curious Cast actually started selling the podcast. And I think they slugged it at that time as sports and news instead of, further suggesting hockey. So, you certainly said, "Are you guys sure this isn't?" You knew what does it say that you knew exactly what happened?
Yeah.
And Jack knew. Two guys I know both know exactly what happened. I didn't know. Just so people are aware, I don't do the Oilers Twitter, or I don't do the Oilers Now Twitter account, which has 40,000 followers.
Yes.
I don't do the Oilers Twitter account, and then I don't download the podcast. So, and that's somebody calling me right now saying you're going to be in trouble, Stauffer, if you keep going here. I'm just having fun with you.
Right. Phil, do you have any fan questions?
Yeah, I got a couple more if that's okay. Lane Larson wants to know, how do they solve the cap crunch next year if Brown takes up more than the cap increases?
Well, they're going to have expiring contracts, right? And I think you might see a slight resolution to things on the back end. That's a good question by Lane, because I think who wouldn't want to play in Edmonton right now with McDavid and Draisaitl and where this team is at, right? So, I mean, I think I relayed the story on the air Chris Knobloch, it wasn't an accident. He ended up in Erie, and he coached. So he coached in Kootenay. Basically, won the WHL championship. Then Braden McNabb knocked out Joey Hishon out of the Memorial Cup and got turfed out of the tournament, and that was it for Kootenay because he was their best defenseman. Yeah, like I think he was the MVP of the playoffs that year for Kootenay in the WHL. So Chris, a year later, wants the U of A job that he and Herbers ultimately got. Interviewed for the job, and Kootenay, in their infinite wisdom, decided to let him go. And in Connor's first year in Erie, Robbie Ftorek was going through a brutal personal matter that you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy. And the Oilers had partnered up with Sherry Bass, and the Oilers Entertainment Group partnered up with Sherry Bass and with Erie on something, and he needed a coach. Mm-hmm. And Sherry's got a lot of time from people from Saskatchewan, and Chris Knobloch was from Imperial. And so Chris was the right guy to go in there. He called me, 3 practices in. He said, Bob, I may be coaching the greatest player that's ever played this game. I've never seen a kid in junior be able to do what this guy could do. And he's 15. Like we're not talking about a 17 or 18-year-old here. And I said, yeah. Oh, by the way, the Leafs took a swing on a guy that's a 6th-round pick, and this guy's going to find a way to play. His name's Connor Brown, and he's just got a relentless work ethic, dog it on the ice. And as my team gets better, he's going to really get a lot better. And I think it was the next year he finished with 128 points and led the OHL in scoring. So I've always had a lot of time for Connor Brown. If you've listened to the show, I know that Pierre Dorion used to get mad because I'd always say how much I loved Connor Brown when he was with the Ottawa Senators.
Yeah.
They had him in.
You did it on this show too. You did it on this show too with us, but before he signed, yeah.
Before he signed, so I've always loved this guy. Yeah. So I'm big on Connor Brown, and that's a good question by Lane. Like, I do think if he has any kind of success, I think he tries to find a way to stay here.
Nice. Yeah, Lane also wanted to know which team improved the most in the NHL this offseason.
Oh. Well, I'll tell you which team.
And then I got one more after this, and then that's it.
I think that the team. I don't think Detroit improved as much as everybody thinks they improved.
Not in the right direction, I don't think.
Right. Like I don't like some of their moves. I think
when does the Heat get on Steve Yzerman here? I know I took away from the Lane question, but does he still get a free pass because it dates back to what he did in Tampa Bay?
Well, I mean, if you look at their 15, 16, 17, and 18 drafts, those were run by Tyler Wright. Right. In 15, they took Svechnikov. Now, the Oilers had time for Svechnikov in 15, too. He's on his 3rd NHL team.
Yeah.
In 16, they traded out a slot where Chikrin was and traded down and took Jalowski. He's in the American League. In 17, they took Rasmussen. I guess you could argue he's a middle 6 forward now. He's 9th overall. In 18, they took Zadina, 6th, instead of Quinn Hughes at 7. Hughes was right underneath their own nose. So there must have been something about Hughes they didn't like. So they didn't get, and I mean, Zadina they bought out. So they didn't get a lot of traction with those picks. But I'm with you. I mean, it's been you know what? Ken came here and took a 28th, 5th place team to the 8th best record in the league over the last 4 years. Do you know who's had the worst record in the NHL over the last 5 years?
Is it Detroit?
It is Detroit.
Yeah. I was going to say Arizona, but I think Arizona's been pretty good.
No, well, Arizona had the one year when they traded for Taylor Hall, right? Where they were squad. No, Detroit's had the worst cumulative record in the league over the last 5 seasons. I do think they'll be better, but the team I'm watching out right now is New Jersey. And I can tell you that there's a lot of people that admire a lot about what New Jersey does as an organization. And I mean, they're going to be transitioning a couple of wonderful defense prospects in. I think, Edmonton's on the most of any NHL team next year down in the States. They're on 18 times. Yeah. I think the Oilers and New Jersey will be the 2 most exciting teams in the league to watch this season.
Yeah, a friend of the pod, Tyler Toffoli's really excited to go there. So really excited. So
hey, and for the record, I'm big on Kirby Dach. I saw Kirby Dach actually at Claire Drake Arena a week ago Friday. And I thought Kirby had a chance to be as good as Jack Hughes. Kirby, if you looked at the first 2 years, Jack didn't kill it in New Jersey, but he's taken a quantum step forward. Now, Kirby's a 6'4" right shot center. I think he's going to be a second line center. They played him a bit at right wing last year. He might, in 5 to 7 years, be like Scheifele, but Jack Hughes is a hell of a player.
Yeah. Phil?
Okay. Last fan question comes from Cam Nickel. He says, who is going to be the starting lineup for first puck drop of the regular season with the Oilers?
Starting lineup. All right, I'll go Kane, McDavid, and Brown. And then on defense, I'll go Nurse and Bouchard with Skinner and goal. Is that what he means by the starting lineup?
Right.
That's exactly what he means. Yep. Perfect. Thanks, Bob. And that again was brought to you by CDN.
Nice job. They're getting their plugs in.
There they are. They are our good buddy there, Marcoux, and in Kelowna. So he's a St. Albert guy, actually. I don't know if you ever met him before, but
I think I
We
have.
got to get Bob a hat, eh? Got to get Bob a CDN hat.
Will Edmonton Oilers one, right? So the EDM is what it is. But yeah, so I guess to close it out, Bob, obviously September is suicide prevention month. Today is suicide prevention day as we record this on Sunday night. This interview will drop on Tuesday morning. But you know, any words that you would kind of have to pass on to anyone that may be going through a bit of a struggle? I know we kind of opened up with that, just the compassion and empathy, but you know, I think when we listen to these radio shows and these podcasts, you know, yours is the number one there. Elliot's, I have Elliot on the dial too. You know, but anything you wanted to kind of pass on, because there's obviously
yeah, sure, Josh. I mean, I just think, you know, you never, I'm going to circle back. You never know what people are going through. You don't know what people have experienced in their childhood. You don't know what they might be going through right now. And so sometimes what happens with people is their immediate reaction is to think the worst of people. And instead of trying to figure out why maybe you had a negative interaction along the way. And so like I'm considerably older than both of you guys. Probably, I would say at least 20 years. Maybe, what are you guys, 37, 38?
I'm 39.
39.
Yep.
What about you?
37.
37. All right. So I'm 18 to 20 years older than you guys. I remember so I've been in my fantasy football team. I was playing fantasy football in 1995. I'm in the same pool. It was the guys from Sports Scene. It used to be a monthly publication. My all Alabama team, I started the wrong quarterback today and I lost. Okay. And I started Jalen Hurts, who was the MVP last year, over Tua, who threw for 450 yards and 3 touchdowns. And I lost because I started the wrong QB. But I talk about pools. I've been in one pool since 1988 with Craig Lupel. That's Joffrey's dad and a bunch of lawyer buddies. And we used to meet at Room at the Top at the University of Alberta. And there was a guy named Bob Fadoon that used to go there, and he was a huge Canadiens fan, and he had a great passion for hockey, and he ended up taking his own life. And I think it was during the 94-95 season, and we were all, you know, Bob was just such a great guy, and we never would have predicted it, right? And so when something like that happens, and to this day there's still a Bob Fadoon scholarship for the Golden Bears hockey program, because he used to work at the bookstore at the U of A. And it really woke a lot of us up in our late 20s, early 30s, because Bob was sort of a more experienced guy. And, you know, just gotta try to help people and understand that, you know, just because maybe you don't necessarily always know what anybody's going through. And I mean, there's been some times on Twitter where I've had a couple people do some pretty disappointing things, and then I back check on them and realize that maybe some way along the line they've had a mental a battle or so, and I go, okay, well, maybe that's a little bit more understandable. So all I'd say is just be good to each other. We got enough problems out there. Like, you know, like our team's called the Oilers. I'm going to support oil and gas, and there's going to be some people out there that don't like that. How that happens in a province like Alberta, I don't know, but it does. Like, people are allowed to have different opinions. And all I can say is just, you know, if you need some help, find a way to get some help, but just be decent to one another. Don't look for a way to try to break somebody down. And I think the one thing I would say, Josh, is people are way more understanding of it today.
They are, yeah.
Than they were 30 years ago. I think at times, and I like the next federal election is going to be really interesting because Poilievre is really pulling well with the younger generation, which is shocking. Like when I went, it's funny because I went up to Grand Prairie on Thursday, and I hadn't been there since '88, and Mulroney won in the '84 and the '88 elections with the Conservatives, and he had over 200 seats. And I brought that up because we were horsing around in Grand Prairie in '88, and we had all these fake water guns. And they had Mulroney there in our hotel, and we didn't know that Mulroney was there. And guys are running around with these fake Uzi guns, squirting water on one another. And the security guys are like, "What the hell are you idiots doing? Like, do you not realize the prime minister's there?" And at that time, like Mulroney was a god. He was like Reagan in Canada, and he was out, and the Conservatives got eliminated in '93. And now it looks like, Trudeau was the guy for a while, but it looks like we might see a bit of change. And I see society moving a little back in some regards. But the one thing that doesn't sit there and go across party lines is fundamental understanding for issues like this. Yeah. That's what I would say. Like, everybody understands we got to contribute, just be decent to one another and show some empathy. So now that I've pontificated enough on this topic, I think you know what I'm saying here. Like, at the end of the day, just be decent. Don't overreact to negative interaction right away. And you know what? Be alert and be aware. But I do think we're much better at understanding this sort of stuff than in the past.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's very.
Your dog's in the background. Is that a dog or a cat?
No, that's a dog. That's our Bruno boy. He's you want to say hi to Bob?
Hey, Bruno.
He's tired, so he's
all right.
Tuckered out. But no, very well said, Bob. Great words from you. And I know one of the big one of the headliners on your show, and adding Ron McLean is love that. More of Ron. I loved your interview with him at the Central Alberta Child Advocacy Center golf tournament for the Oilers versus Flames. And I just think him adding part of your show is going to be good. And I think a lot of listeners will really like that. I know when we had him on in January last year, it was amazing. And we're looking forward to having him and Kelly Rudy back.
Classy guy.
Very classy guy. All right. Very well said. We'll end on that. Remember, everyone, be kind, be humble. Stop, maybe say hello to someone that might change the conversation, and you might find a brand new friend, and you might just change someone's life where you don't know where they're going through. So it just takes 30 seconds to be kind and just say, "Hey, how's it going?" So we like to end on that. Everyone have a great week. We have a loaded podcast show coming up throughout this week. So stay tuned to some great interviews as we have. And we like to thank Bob Stauffer for joining us again. Enjoy. Have a good one.